Clara Hayes had not slept properly in weeks. The October wind off Lake Michigan whipped through the cracked windows of her tiny Southside apartment in Englewood, carrying the chill straight into her bones. She was 28 years old, but the mirror showed a woman who looked 40, thin, malnourished. Her dark hair limp and unwashed, her fair skin pale and stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Poverty had stripped her down to nothing. No heat most nights. Electricity flickering on borrowed time. The refrigerator empty, except for a half carton of milk she saved for whatever strength it could give her babies. The quadruplets had come too early at 29 weeks after a pregnancy that drained what little reserve she had left. Sophia, Isabella, Mia, and little Tommy Jr., named for a memory she kept buried deep, were born tiny, each weighing less than 3 pounds. The hospital on the south side had done what it could, but when complications set in a rare, aggressive respiratory distress, compounded by patent ductus arteriosus, and early signs of infection, the doctors shook their heads. Days, maybe a week, they told her gently. We're sorry. Clara had no insurance, no savings, no family left to call. Her waitressing job at a greasy diner near 63rd Street had ended the day her water broke. Eviction notices piled up on the door like fallen leaves. She sat on the sagging couch in her threadbare sweater, staring at the foreclosure papers, her hands trembling. How had it come to this? Nights on the streets loomed in her mind, cold, wind-filled nights with 4 fragile infants. The thought made her stomach twist with a nausea deeper than any morning sickness. She felt dizzy, numb the room, tilting as if the floor might give way. Horror crept in slowly. Then all at once her babies were dying and she was powerless to stop it. That was when she remembered him. Vincent Moretti. The name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Years ago, when she was just a teenager on the south side, she had known his younger brother, Tommy. Tommy had been kind to her in a world that wasn't. And Vincent. Vincent had always watched from a distance, those intense dark eyes following her with something she could never name. Rumor said he ruled Chicago's shadows now, the Italian-American families, the outfit, whatever they called it these days. Powerful. Wealthy beyond imagining. Dangerous. Desperation made people do unreasonable things. Clara found an old number through a mutual acquaintance from the neighborhood, someone who still owed Tommy a favor from the grave. She called. Her voice was soft, timid, breaking as she explained. Mr. Moretti, my babies. They're premature quadruplets, the doctors say. They don't have long. I don't have anywhere else to turn. There was silence on the line, then a low, controlled voice. Come to the Gold Coast Tower. Now. She arrived at the towering building on Lakeshore Drive just after midnight, clutching a small duffel with her few belongings. The doorman eyed her worn coat and exhausted face, but waved her through after a quick call upstairs. The private elevator rose smoothly, silently, opening directly into the penthouse, a world Clara could scarcely comprehend. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed sweeping views of Lake Michigan, the city lights glittering like diamonds on black water. The space was vast. Modern yet warm marble floors, plush leather sectionals, a kitchen with stainless steel appliances that gleamed under soft, recessed lighting. Private terraces stretched outside, furnished with heaters and loungers. It smelled of polished wood and faint citrus, nothing like the mildew and despair of her apartment. Vincent Moretti stood near the windows, tall and broad-shouldered, his fair skin contrasted by dark hair neatly combed back. He wore a tailored shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. At 42, he carried the weight of his world in the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw. Wealth radiated from him, the kind earned in shadows, protected by fear. But beneath it, Clara sensed turmoil, gnawing guilt that kept him awake at night, remorse over losses he could never undo, a violent emotional conflict that made his hands clench at his sides even now. He had built a private neonatal intensive care unit on one entire floor of the penthouse. State-of-the-art incubators, ventilators, monitors beeping softly. A team of the country's top neonatologists on call around the clock. He had done it quietly, anonymously, funding the transfer of her babies from the public hospital. Millions poured in without question. Why, Clara wondered, her heart pounding with confusion and fear. She was nobody to him. Vincent turned as she entered the nursery wing. His gaze locked on her thin frame, shivering in the oversized coat, eyes wide with exhaustion and guarded curiosity. Something surged in him, then overwhelming and instant. A fierce, passionate protectiveness that bordered on love. From the very first moment he saw her, like this broken, yet unbroken. It tore at him violently, guilt over his brother's death years ago. Remorse for the life he led that kept good people at arm's length. Conflict raging because she reminded him of everything pure he had lost. How could he feel this pull toward a woman he barely knew, one now tied to him through these fragile lives? The doctors are here, he said, his voice deep controlled but laced with something raw. Your children. They're stable for now. But it's bad. Clara's legs nearly gave way. She gripped the doorframe, dizziness washing over her again, the world blurring. Shock, confusion, deep disorientation, she felt numb as if floating outside her body. This man, this stranger who commanded Chicago's underworld, had saved her babies from certain death in a public ward. Yet rivals whispered about him in the streets. She had heard stories of tense confrontations, cars pulling up suddenly on dark corners, words exchanged that stopped just short of bloodshed. Just last week, driving through a South Side intersection, Vincent's black SUV had been boxed in by rivals from a West Side crew. Words were shouted, threats over territory, but Vincent's men diffused it with cold stares and positioned hands, no shots fired. He protected what was his with calculated restraint. Now inexplicably, her babies were his to protect too. "Why?" she whispered, her voice soft and polite, timid before his power. "Why are you doing this for me?" Vincent's jaw tightened. Inner conflict raged, remorse consuming him for the dangers his world brought, guilt that he could buy life while others suffered. Yet seeing her there, destitute and fierce in her love for those tiny lives, ignited something explosive in his chest. "Because no child deserves to fight alone," he said finally. "And neither does their mother." Clara stepped closer to the incubators, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. The babies lay inside tubes and wires, connecting their fragile bodies to machines that hummed life into them. Sophia's tiny chest rose and fell weakly. Isabella's fingers twitched. Mia and Tommy Jr. fought with every shallow breath. The doctors stood nearby, charts in hand, explaining the grim prognosis in hushed tones, lungs underdeveloped, hearts straining, infections threatening. The Penthouse staff, discreet, professional, moved like ghosts, bringing Clara warm soup, a soft blanket. But the atmosphere felt heavy, like a tomb wrapped in luxury. Everyone knew the truth. Money could buy the best care, but it couldn't buy miracles. Vincent watched her from the doorway, his heart torn by violent emotion. He had faced down rivals in street standoffs last month near Rush Street. A rival capo approached his car at a light, words heated over a gambling debt, tension thick until Vincent's calm threat sent the man retreating. Power protected him. But here, against this invisible enemy stealing breaths from infants, he was powerless. Guilt gnawed deeper his life of control, yet he couldn't control this. Clara sank into a chair beside the incubators, her hand pressing against the warm plastic. Fear gripped her, horror at how close they had come to losing everything. Yet in this impossible place, surrounded by wealth that highlighted her poverty's humiliation, a flicker of something stirred, guarded curiosity about this man who had pulled her from the abyss. Vincent turned away, staring out at the lake, his inner world in turmoil. From the moment she walked in, love had surged, fierce, intense, unreasonable. It terrified him, this overwhelming need to shield her, to make her world right. But how could a man like him love someone so pure when his hands carried shadows outside? Another car idled suspiciously down the block, rivals watching, testing. Vincent's men noted it, ready. Drama simmered, unfairness piled on unfairness, a poor woman thrust into a dangerous world for the sake of her dying babies. Clara closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her under. In the quiet, condensed stillness of monitors beeping, she whispered a prayer. The gap between her cold nights and this heated luxury felt absurdly cruel, yet here she was rescued by the most powerful man in Chicago. And in his heart, Vincent knew this was only the beginning of the storm. The October nights had grown crueler since Clara last stood on the street. Wind knifed down Lakeshore Drive, finding every tear in her thin coat as she stepped out of the rideshare Vincent had sent. She clutched the small duffel bag that held everything she owned: 2 faded t-shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a worn pair of sneakers, and a tiny knitted cap she had made for the babies while sitting in the hospital waiting room. Her body ached from weeks of sleeping upright in plastic chairs, from skipping meals to save bus fare, from the bone-deep exhaustion of a mother watching her children slip away. She looked up at the towering Gold Coast building, its glass facade reflecting the city lights like cold fire. The doorman barely glanced at her before waving her toward the private elevator. When the doors closed, the sudden warmth and silence pressed against her ears. The ascent was smooth, almost soundless, yet her heart hammered so violently she feared she might faint. Dizziness swept over her in waves. The mirrored walls showed a woman she hardly recognized. Cheeks hollow, eyes ringed with purple shadows, lips cracked from cold and dehydration. Poverty had carved its signature into every line of her face. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse nursery wing. Soft lighting bathed the space in a golden glow. 4 state-of-the-art incubators stood in a gentle semicircle, surrounded by monitors that beeped in steady, reassuring rhythm. Nurses in quiet scrubs moved with practiced calm. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmed cotton, nothing like the harsh chemical tang of the public NICU she had left behind. Vincent Moretti stood near the largest window, his back to her phone pressed to his ear. Even from behind, power radiated from him, broad shoulders and a charcoal sweater posture straight as steel. When he ended the call and turned, his dark eyes found her immediately. Something fierce and instantaneous flared in his gaze. an overwhelming surge that tore through him like wildfire. Love raw and burning from the very first moment he saw her standing there fragile yet defiant. It terrified him. Guilt crashed against remorse. Violent conflict raged in his chest. How could he feel this for a woman he had only watched from afar years ago? A woman whose life his world had indirectly shattered. Clara's breath caught. Fear and curiosity tangled inside her. She had expected cold distance, perhaps polite dismissal. Instead, his stare held her pinned intense and unreadable. Her knees weakened. She gripped the duffel strap to steady herself. "Miss Hayes," he said quietly, voice deep and controlled. "You're here." His tone was polite, almost gentle, yet it carried the weight of absolute authority. Clara swallowed her voice, coming out soft and timid. "Mr. Moretti, thank you for letting me come. I didn't know where else to go." Vincent's jaw tightened. Inner torment gnawed deeper. He had built an empire on fear and loyalty, yet one exhausted woman's whispered gratitude undid him. He gestured toward the incubators. "Your children are there. The doctors will update you." Clara moved forward on unsteady legs, drawn like a moth to light. When she reached the first incubator, tears blurred her vision. Sophia lay inside, tiny chest rising and falling beneath the clear dome. Isabella beside her, Mia next, and little Tommy Jr., farthest each one fighting with every fragile breath. She pressed trembling fingers to the warm plastic, a sob catching in her throat. Behind her, Vincent watched in silence. The sight of her so thin, the outline of her shoulder blades showed through her coat, hair limp from sleepless nights, ignited a protective fury he had never known. Remorse flooded him for the dangers his life invited, for the brother he had failed to shield, for every cold night Clara had endured while he lived in heated luxury. Violent emotion tore at him. He wanted to pull her into his arms and promise the world, yet fear of tainting her purity held him frozen. A nurse approached with a clipboard. "Miss Hayes, the attending physician, is on his way. The latest labs show the infection markers are still climbing. We're doing everything possible." Everything possible. Clara heard the unspoken truth beneath the kindness, everything money could buy, and still it might not be enough. The unfairness struck her like a physical blow. Why did some mothers sit in marble penthouses, while others huddled in unheated apartments? Why did her babies fight for every breath, while others were born strong and safe? Confusion and deep disorientation spun through her. The room tilted again, and she gripped the edge of an incubator to keep from falling. Vincent saw the sway in her stance, and crossed the room in 3 long strides. His hand hovered near her elbow, not quite touching. "Sit," he said, voice low. "You'll collapse." Clara obeyed, sinking into a plush chair that felt sinfully soft after weeks on hard plastic. Shame burned her cheeks, shame at her weakness, at her poverty laid bare in this palace of wealth. Yet beneath the humiliation, guarded curiosity stirred. Why had he done this? Why bring her here into his private world? Before she could ask, Vincent's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, expression hardening. "Excuse me," he murmured, stepping into the hallway. Through the open door, Clara heard fragments of conversation, sharp, clipped Italian mixed with English. A name she recognized from neighborhood whispers, Rossi Crew, territory dispute. Rush Street. Her stomach knotted with fresh fear. She had heard stories of sudden confrontations, cars pulling alongside at red lights, windows lowered, tense words exchanged until one side backed down. Vincent's world was violence held in check by threat alone. Minutes later, he returned, tension coiled tight in his shoulders. His eyes met hers again, and the burning intensity was still there, passion barely leashed. It confused her, frightened her, yet sent an unexpected warmth through her frozen core. "The doctors will be here soon," he said. "There's a guest suite prepared for you. Food, whatever you need." Clara shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "I can't pay for any of this, Mr. Moretti. I have nothing." The words hung between them, pitiful and humiliating. She waited for pity, for dismissal. Instead, Vincent's expression darkened with something fierce. "You don't owe me anything," he said roughly. "Ever." His tone carried finality, but beneath it Clara heard torment, gnawing remorse for the life he led, guilt that his wealth could save her children while others suffered. Violent inner conflict tore at him. He wanted to shield her from every hardship, yet knew his protection came shadowed by danger. A sudden beep from Tommy Jr.'s monitor made them both start. The nurse hurried over, adjusting settings. "Just a momentary dip in saturation," she reassured. "He's stabilizing." Clara's heart lurched. She leaned forward, pressing both palms to the incubator. Silent tears tracked down her thin cheeks. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, the unfairness of it all crashed over her anew. Her babies clinging to life, while she sat in unimaginable luxury, rescued by a man whose world could destroy them both. Vincent stood behind her, close enough that she felt his warmth, His hand rose, hesitated, then settled lightly on her shoulder, the briefest touch, yet it burned through her coat like sunlight on snow. Shock rippled through her. Confusion and deep disorientation made her breath catch. No one had touched her with gentleness in years. "I'm staying right here," she whispered fiercely, more to herself than to him. "I'm not leaving them." Vincent's fingers tightened fractionally on her shoulder before withdrawing. "Then neither am I," he said quietly. Outside, far below on the street, headlights flashed twice a signal from his security detail. Another car had been spotted circling the block. Rossi crew testing boundaries. Vincent's jaw clenched. Drama simmered, escalating with every hour Clara remained under his roof. Rivals sensed weakness in his sudden protectiveness. Whispers spread that Vincent Moretti had someone precious to lose. Inside, the nursery monitors beeped steadily. Clara rested her forehead against the cool plastic of Tommy Jr.'s incubator, exhaustion pulling at her. Yet even as fear and poverty's humiliation clawed at her heart, a tiny spark flickered, the guarded realization that for the first time in years she was not alone. And across the room, Vincent watched her with eyes that held a storm, love surging fierce and passionate, tearing his carefully controlled world apart from the inside. The monitors in the nursery hummed their relentless song through the small hours of October, a mechanical lullaby that mocked the fragility of the lives it guarded. Clara Hayes sat hunched in the plush armchair beside the incubators, her thin fingers tracing invisible patterns on the warm plastic domes. Sleep had come in fits, haunted by dreams of cold wind, howling through her Southside apartment's broken windows, of eviction notices fluttering like cruel confetti of her body, curled around an empty belly to ward off hunger. She was malnourished to the point of invisibility, ribs pressing against her threadbare sweater skin, translucent over knuckles worn raw from scrubbing diner tables for tips that never came. Poverty's grip was a vice night's, spent shivering under a single threadbare blanket, rationing instant noodles until the packets ran dry, her mind fraying from the endless loop of desperation and powerlessness. Yet here in this impossible eyrie above Chicago's glittering sprawl, a fragile spark had ignited. It began with a song. Around 3 a.m, as the city lights blurred into a distant haze beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Clara's voice had risen, soft, cracked, but steady. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The words drawn from some half-remembered melody her own mother had sung before the streets claimed her filled the room. She sang to Sophia first, then Isabella, Mia, and little Tommy Jr., her gaze fixed on their tiny forms. Tubes snaked from their noses, wires tethered them to machines. But for a moment, the nursery felt less like a prison and more like a cradle. The babies responded. Sophia's minuscule fingers flexed a stronger twitch than before. Isabella's heart rate on the monitor steadied the jagged peaks, smoothing into something almost rhythmic. Mia let out a faint mewling cry, not distress, but life asserting itself. And Tommy Jr., the smallest, his chest rose with a breath that held just a fraction longer. Clara froze, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. Was it real, or just her desperate heart weaving illusions from beeps and shadows? Horror and anxiety coiled in her gut, but beneath them, heightened curiosity bloomed, a guarded wonder at this tiny defiance against the odds. Vincent Moretti watched from the shadowed hallway, his broad frame silhouetted against the dim corridor lights. He had not slept either. Power coursed through his veins like dark current. The Penthouse's private chef had prepared trays of gourmet meals in the kitchen below filet mignon, seared to perfection, artisanal cheeses paired with rare vintages from a cellar worth more than Clara's lifetime earnings. His wealth was a fortress. Armored SUVs, idling curbside security teams, scanning feeds from hidden cameras, a vault of cash that could buy silence or loyalty with a whisper. Yet it availed him nothing here. The sight of Clara, her voice trembling yet unbroken, pouring love into the void, tore at him with violent intensity. Love surged again, passionate and burning, an inferno that had kindled the instant she arrived and now raged unchecked. It conflicted with everything, gnawing remorse over Tommy's death, inner torment at drawing her into his shadowed world, a furious self-loathing that he who commanded men with a glance could not command a miracle for her. Children. He stepped into the nursery, then his polished loafers silent on the heated marble floor. The air between them crackled, charged with unspoken tempests. Clara's song faltered. She looked up, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Her voice, when it came, was soft and timid, laced with the deference of someone who had learned to appease the powerful just to survive. "Mr. Moretti." "I didn't mean to wake you." Vincent's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "It's 3 a.m, Miss Hayes. You should be resting." His tone was rougher than intended, edged with the fury building inside him, not at her, but at the injustice of it all. Why must she fight alone when he could summon specialists from Johns Hopkins with a phone call? Why did her poverty humiliate her so, while his excess mocked her from every gleaming surface? The disparity was a knife twist, her duffel bag, slumped, forgotten by the door, stained and frayed against the backdrop of his custom Italian leather chairs. Clara shrank back slightly, numbness creeping into her limbs, a deep disorientation making the room spin. She felt powerless, exposed, a beggar in a king's court. I can't sleep, not when they're like this, she whispered, her politeness a shield against the storm in his eyes. The singing, it helps them. Or me. I don't know anymore. Vincent's fury crested, then not a shout, but a low thunder. He crossed to the window, staring out at the black expanse of Lake Michigan waves churning under a sliver of moon. Helps. You're torturing yourself. Torturing all of us. The words escaped before he could leash them, born of his own violent inner conflict. How dare fate thrust this upon her, evicted for unpaid rent after birthing 4 miracles too soon, hospital bills piling like accusations. No father to claim them because life had been one absurdly unfair blow after another. And him. He who had just quelled a tense standoff on Wabash Avenue an hour earlier. His limo hemmed in by a rival crew's sedans at a stoplight, engines revving, glares exchanged over rolled-down windows, until his driver edged forward, with deliberate menace, forcing them to yield without a shot. Fired. Power like that, and yet here he stood helpless before 4 tiny heartbeats. Clara rose unsteadily, her malnourished frame swaying, pain lancing through her sleep-deprived skull. Shock rippled through her dizziness, threatening to unbalance her completely. This man who had plucked her from destitution now lashed out. Fear gripped her throat, but curiosity, fierce unbidden, pushed her forward, torturing. Her voice trembled, still soft, but gaining an edge of desperation. You think this is torture? Try holding your baby through a ventilator mask while the social worker explains food stamps won't cover formula. Try choosing between heat and a bus pass on nights when the wind cuts like glass. Tears choked her, hot and humiliating. The unfairness of it, her reduced to begging scraps from a diner boss who docked her pay for looking tired, clawed at her insides, evoking a sympathy she wished she could spare herself. Vincent whirled his face, a mask of torment. The surge of love hit him harder, a burning tide that drowned reason. He closed the distance in 2 strides, towering over her, yet his hands. Those hands that had signed deals in bloodless boardrooms and stared down enforcers hovered uselessly at his sides. I know torture, he growled, voice cracking with remorse. I watched my brother bleed out on a South Side sidewalk because I wasn't fast enough. I built walls of money to keep the pain out, and now. His eyes bored into hers, passionate intensity blazing. Now you're here breaking them down with a damn song. And I can't, God help me, I can't watch you shatter too. The confession hung in the air, raw and unintended. Clara staggered back, a step, numbness flooding her veins, the world tilting into deep disorientation. Pain bloomed in her chest, not physical, but the violent tear of realization. This powerful man, with his empire of shadowed wealth, carried scars as deep as her poverty's wounds. Confusion warred with guarded curiosity. She wanted to flee, to curl into the cold familiarity of her old life. Yet his gaze held her promising protection she had never known. A sudden alert from Isabella's monitor pierced the stillness, a dip in oxygen, brief but sharp. The nurse on duty hurried in, adjusting the flow with calm efficiency. She's stabilizing, the woman said softly. It happens. But look, the overall trends are better tonight. Stronger responses. Clara rushed to the incubator, pressing her palm flat against the dome. The baby's tiny foot kicked faintly as if in answer to the song. A quiet, condensed, emotional stillness settled, then broken only by the monitor's steady pulse. Vincent stood frozen, watching the exchange, Clara's fierce tenderness, the baby's fragile fight. Remorse gnawed deeper. He had pulled her from the streets, but at what cost? His world invited shadows just yesterday near the Loop. His convoy had been tailed by a bold West Side faction. Cars weaving close at an intersection, horns blaring in silent challenge. Until his lead vehicle swerved ahead, asserting dominance without collision. Rivals scented vulnerability. Now whispers of Moretti's soft spot circulating like smoke. Clara turned to him, her voice polite yet laced with timid defiance. See, they're fighting, because someone believes they can. Her eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, met his. In that gaze, shock mingled with an overwhelming surge, not just gratitude, but the dawning horror of dependency on a man whose fury could consume them both. Vincent's heart tore violently, then love's fire clashing with guilt's ice. He reached out, his fingers brushing her arm a touch, electric burning through fabric. Then keep singing, he murmured, voice rough with conflict. But don't do it alone. Outside security chatter crackled over his earpiece, another vehicle circling the block, lights off. Drama escalated, numbing and confusing as the night deepened. Clara sank back into the chair, Her inner world violently rent poverty's humiliation stark against his wealth's embrace. Yet for the first time a spark of hope flickered, guarded and curious in the dark, and Vincent, retreating to the hallway, pressed a fist to his chest where the burning passion warred with remorse. He would protect her, no matter the cost. Dawn crept over Chicago in pale October light, painting the Penthouse nursery in soft golds and grays. Clara Hayes had not moved from the armchair through the long night, her body folded forward, forehead resting against the warm plastic of Tommy Jr.'s incubator. Exhaustion had finally claimed her in shallow, uneasy sleep dreams, haunted by the whistle of cold wind through her Englewood apartment's shattered pane, by the landlord's pounding fist, and the stack of final notices that had driven her out into the street with nothing but a duffel and 4 lives depending on her. She woke with a start when the lead neonatologist, Dr. Elena Ramirez, entered at 7, sharp tablet in hand, expression unreadable. Clara straightened slowly, every joint aching her malnourished frame, protesting the movement. Hunger gnawed hollow in her stomach. She had eaten nothing since a stale granola bar 2 days earlier, saving the last of her cash for bus fare that never came. Her sweater hung loose on shoulders, sharpened by months of skipped meals, skin dry and cracked from nights when heat was a luxury she could not afford. The disparity struck her anew here. Trays of fresh fruit and warm pastries waited on a side table, delivered silently by staff she had not even heard arrive. Wealth surrounded her like an alien atmosphere, thick carpet muffing every footstep, air purified and scented faintly, with lavender monitors that cost more than her yearly wages glowing with precise data. Doctor, Ramirez studied the overnight charts in silence, brow furrowing deeper with each swipe. Finally, she looked up, confusion plain in her eyes. Miss Hayes, I don't understand this. The infection markers are down. Oxygen saturation is holding steady without increased support. Cardiac outputs are stronger across all 4 infants. This shouldn't be happening. Not this fast. Not without new intervention. Clara's heart lurched. She rose unsteadily, dizziness sweeping through her in a sickening wave, the floor seeming to tilt beneath her worn sneakers. Shock and deep disorientation numbed her limbs. She gripped the incubator rail to keep from falling. You mean, they're better? Her voice came out soft, timid, almost afraid to believe. Better is an understatement, Doctor, Ramirez replied, shaking her head. I've ordered repeat labs to confirm. But the trends, they're defying the prognosis. A quiet, condensed emotional stillness settled over the room, then broken only by the steady beep of monitors. Clara pressed both palms to the domes, tears spilling silently. Sophia's tiny hand uncurled, fingers splaying as if reaching. Isabella's chest rose with newfound depth. Mia let out a soft, contented sigh through her nasal cannula. And Tommy Jr., the weakest, kicked once, a deliberate movement that sent joy and terror crashing through Clara in equal measure. Unreasonable hope warred with the memory of every unfair blow life had dealt her. The diner job lost when pregnancy complications forced bed rest. The hospital social worker's gentle suggestion of adoption, because a single mother of quadruplets could never manage alone the nights she had walked the freezing streets to keep blood moving in her legs, while her apartment sat dark and unpaid. Vincent Moretti stood in the doorway, unseen until that moment. He had returned from an early morning drive, another tense confrontation near the Mag Mile, where a Rossi convoy had cut off his SUV at a light engines. Revving in silent challenge, windows lowered just enough for hard stares and unspoken threats. His driver had maneuvered forward inch by inch, until the rival vehicles yielded, peeling away with screeching tires, but no shots exchanged. Power held the line as always. Yet power felt hollow now. He watched Clara's tear-streaked face, the way her thin shoulders shook with silent sobs of bewildered gratitude. The surge of love hit him harder than any rival's glare, passionate, intense, a burning tide that threatened to drown every careful wall he had built. Obsession took root, deeper hours spent reviewing security feeds of the nursery, studying the curve of her cheek as she sang the fierce tenderness in her exhausted eyes. Gnawing remorse clawed at him for the brother he could not save, for the dangers his protection now invited into her life, for the violent inner conflict that made him want to lock the world away from her, even as he knew he was part of its darkness. How could a man whose wealth bought private jets and offshore accounts not buy certainty for 4 fragile heartbeats? He stepped forward, voice low. The doctor's right. Something's changed. Clara turned startled, wiping her face with the sleeve of her worn sweater. Her voice remained polite, soft with the deference poverty had taught her. Mr. Moretti, did you hear they're fighting harder? Vincent's jaw tightened. The sight of her malnourished, sleep-deprived, yet radiant with hope, tore at him violently. I heard. He moved closer, close enough to see the faint bruises of exhaustion under her eyes, the cracked lips she kept biting in anxiety. Wealth's intensity pressed in the custom cashmere throw, draped over a nearby chair, the discreet diamond cufflinks glinting at his wrists, the private elevator that whisked billion-dollar deals, and now this fragile miracle upward into his world, Doctor. Ramirez excused herself to oversee the new labs, leaving them alone. Silence stretched thick with unspoken storms. Clara's guarded curiosity surfaced again. "Why does it scare you?" she asked, quietly, timidly. "That they're better," Vincent's breath caught. The question pierced straight to the torment. "Because hope is dangerous," he said roughly. "It makes you believe you can keep what you love, and I've learned the hard way that belief gets punished." His words hung heavy. Clara felt dizziness return, confusion, and deep disorientation spinning through her. A powerful man feared in streets, where cars boxed each other in silent standoffs. Where territory was claimed by presence alone stood before her, admitting fear. The unfairness of it all crashed over her anew. She who had nothing now received everything from a man who seemed to fear receiving anything back. "I don't understand you," she whispered, voice trembling. "You've given us this, all of this." She gestured weakly at the gleaming equipment, the panoramic view of the lake sparkling under morning sun. "And you look like it hurts you." Vincent closed the distance, stopping just short of touching her. His eyes burned with intensity. "It does hurt," he admitted, voice raw, "because every good thing I touch turns to risk. Last night another crew tested me on Michigan Avenue, 3 cars blocking the intersection, daring me to react. I held back. For you. For them." He nodded toward the incubators. "And holding back feels like weakness when all I want is to burn the world down to keep you safe." Clara's heart pounded, fear and heightened curiosity tangling until she could barely breathe. Shock rippled through her numbness in her fingers, pain behind her eyes. A man like this, capable of commanding silence with a glance, spoke of burning worlds for her. The psychological shock was extreme, from nights of cold wind and empty cupboards to this overwhelming declaration. Tears welled again, not just for her babies, but for the violent tear in her own inner world suspicion that it was all temporary, warring with a desperate wish to believe it real. Vincent saw the sway in her stance, and reached out at last, steadying her elbow with infinite gentleness. The touch electrified them both. His thumb brushed the inside of her arm, a caress he had not intended but could not stop. Love surged, passionate and burning, tearing his carefully controlled heart to shreds. "You should eat," he said hoarsely. "Rest. Let me carry this for a while." Clara shook her head, tears spilling. "I can't. If I close my eyes, I'll wake up back on the street, and this will be a dream." The confession broke something in him. Remorse and obsession collided. He guided her gently to the wide window seat overlooking the lake, settling beside her, close but not crowding. Below, traffic flowed in orderly streams. Above, gulls wheeled in freedom. The contrast of her poverty against his wealth had never been starker. Outside the building, security feeds showed another suspicious vehicle idling across the street, different plates, this time West Side markings. Drama escalated quietly, rivals circling like wolves scenting blood. Vincent's phone vibrated with updates, but he silenced it. For the first time in years, something mattered more than territory. In the quiet that followed, Clara leaned her head against the cool glass exhaustion pulling at her. Vincent sat motionless, watching her breathe, the burning in his chest growing until it consumed every other thought. He would protect this, her, the babies, the fragile spark of hope with everything he had. And if the world pushed back, he would push harder. Mid-October light filtered through the penthouse windows, turning the nursery into a haven of soft warmth. The quadruplets had passed the critical first weeks, their tiny bodies gaining strength in ways the doctors still whispered about with puzzled wonder. Clara Hayes stood at the wide counter in the adjoining kitchenette, her thin hands carefully arranging items she had purchased with the last $20 hidden in her duffel. A small box of red, white, and blue streamers, miniature baseball-themed decorations from a dollar store, and ingredients for a simple sheet cake, flour, sugar, eggs, food coloring. Her fingers trembled as she laid them out. Poverty's shadow clung to her still. The sweater she wore was the same one from eviction day, frayed at the cuffs. Her frame remained malnourished, cheeks hollow from months of choosing formula over food nights when cold wind had been her only companion in an unheated room. Yet here in this palace of gleaming marble and endless plenty, she dared to dream small. She had decided it quietly in the hushed hours between feedings. The babies would soon reach their 1-month survival mark, a milestone few premature quadruplets achieved against such odds. In the NICU support groups she had once attended online from a cracked phone screen, mothers spoke of celebrating these fragile victories with quiet rituals. A photo, a cake, a banner. Clara wanted that for her children. Not grandeur, just acknowledgement that they had fought and were still here. Vincent Moretti entered from his private study, pausing at the sight. He had just returned from a midday drive through the Loop, another bold confrontation, where a Rossi faction vehicle had pulled alongside his convoy at a busy intersection, windows downstairs locked in silent challenge over a disputed gambling venue, engines revved in warning. His driver held steady, inching forward until the rival car swerved away with a frustrated honk. No shots, no escalation, just the constant dance of power. Yet the tension lingered in his shoulders as he watched Clara now arranging her humble treasures with fierce concentration. His heart tore anew, the surge of love, passionate, intense, burning without cease, since her arrival flared hotter at the sight of her determination. Obsession deepened. He had begun leaving anonymous gifts. Fresh, deep dish pizza, delivered warm tiny Cubs onesies, folded neatly on the nursery dresser, a worn baseball glove from his own South Side childhood placed quietly near her chair. Wealth's intensity surrounded her. The kitchen's sub-zero refrigerator stocked with organic produce, the terrace heaters humming softly outside the security team that shadowed every delivery. Yet she used her last dollars for streamers as if afraid to touch his abundance. "What is this?" he asked, voice low, controlled, but edged with something raw. Clara startled, turning with the box of decorations clutched to her chest. Her voice emerged, soft, timid, polite as always when addressing him. "Mr. Moretti, it's for the babies. In a few days, they'll be 1 month old adjusted age from their due date. I thought we could celebrate, just a little. A cake, some decorations, a photo under a banner." She gestured weakly at the items, shame coloring her cheeks at their cheapness against his opulence. Vincent's jaw tightened. Inner torment gnawed deeper remorse for the dangers his world invited. Violent conflict raging at the thought of her planning something so fragile in a life where fragility was punished. A celebration. His tone hardened. "For children who might not see the next week, you think that's kind. It's cruel, Miss Hayes. Giving yourself something to look forward to when the doctors still can't promise anything." The words struck like a physical blow. Clara swayed, dizziness crashing over her in a numbing wave, the counter's edge the only thing keeping her upright. Shock and deep disorientation tore through her, pain behind her eyes, confusion violently rending her inner world. How many unfair events had piled upon her already? The pregnancy discovered too late for proper care. The job lost when swelling forced her off her feet. The hospital bills that arrived like accusations while she rationed saltines to quiet hunger pangs. And now even this small act of hope was called cruel by the man who had saved them. Tears welled hot and humiliating. "Cruel," she whispered, voice trembling yet gaining a desperate edge. "What's cruel is acting like they're already gone. I've spent nights on the street, rather than leave them alone in that apartment, cold wind cutting through my coat while I walked to keep warm. I've chosen between medicine and food until I couldn't stand straight. Watching them fight while we do nothing that's cruel, Mr. Moretti." Vincent flinched as if struck. The sight of her tears, thin frame shaking, malnourished hands clutching cheap streamers ignited a fury directed entirely inward. Love burned fiercer, an overwhelming surge that threatened to consume him. How dare he diminish her hope when his wealth could buy islands, yet could not buy certainty? Gnawing remorse clawed at him for Tommy's death, for every rival glare that now circled closer, because whispers spread of his weakness upstairs. Violent inner conflict tore at his chest. He wanted to shield her from disappointment, yet her defiance stirred something sacred in him. He stepped closer, close enough to see the cracked lips, the exhaustion bruises under her eyes. "You don't understand," he said roughly. "Hope like that. It breaks people when it fails." Clara lifted her chin, guarded curiosity flickering through the fear. "And giving up doesn't break them faster." Her politeness held, but desperation laced every word. "They need to know someone believes in tomorrow. I need to believe it." A long moment of quiet, condensed, emotional stillness stretched between them. Outside, Lake Michigan glittered under afternoon sun. Inside, monitors beeped their steady encouragement. Vincent's gaze dropped to the decorations, to the tiny plastic baseball bats, the food coloring packets, and something cracked inside him. He reached past her, picking up the box of streamers with careful fingers. "Red, white, and blue," he murmured. "American flag colors. Fitting." His voice softened, tormented. "If we do this, it has to be right. Not dollar store leftovers." Clara's breath caught. Confusion and heightened curiosity warred with suspicion. I can't afford more, Mr. Moretti." This was all I had left. The admission humiliated her, anew poverty laid bare in this kitchen of granite and gold fixtures. Vincent's heart tore violently then. He set the box down, turning to her fully. "You don't need to afford anything. Not anymore." The words carried finality, but beneath them remorse and passion collided. He pulled out his phone, dialing his assistant with clipped instructions: premium bakery for a custom sheet cake, professional decorators for the nursery, a photographer on standby. Wealth mobilized in seconds resources that could redirect traffic or silence rumors now bent toward balloons and frosting. Clara watched numbness spreading through her limbs, deep disorientation, making the room spin. A man who faced down rivals in street standoffs yesterday near River North, his convoy forced to brake hard when two unmarked sedans cut across lanes, drivers exchanging hard glances until his security vehicle nosed forward aggressively. Claiming space without contact was now organizing a baby milestone party. The psychological shock was extreme, from scavenging cans for deposit money to this overwhelming protection. "You don't have to," she whispered, voice soft and timid. "It was supposed to be small." Vincent ended the call, eyes locking on hers with burning intensity. "Small isn't what they deserve. Not after what they've fought through. And not what you deserve," he thought, the unspoken words tearing at him. Love surged, passionate and unreasonable, clashing with fear that his world's shadows would eclipse this light. Later that afternoon, as decorators arrived with crates of plush balloons and a custom banner reading "Happy 1 month, Little Fighters," Clara stood in the nursery doorway, tears streaming silently. The transformation was gentle yet breathtaking, soft lighting patriotic streamers draped like hope itself. Vincent watched from the hallway phone, buzzing with another alert, rivals massing near a shared border testing. Drama escalated, suspense tightening like a wire. Yet in this moment of quiet wonder, Clara turned to him, voice barely audible. "Thank you." Simple words laden with every cold night endured. Vincent's throat tightened. He nodded once, unable to speak past the violent emotion tearing his heart. He would give her this celebration. And if the world pushed back, he would stand between it and her light. The impossible milestone drew near, fragile as the lives it honored, bright as the love now burning uncontrollably between them. The nursery had become a world unto itself in the deepening October chill. Soft patriotic streamers swayed gently in the conditioned air, miniature baseball decorations glinted under recessed lights, and the scent of fresh vanilla frosting lingered from the custom sheet cake delivered that morning. Clara Hayes moved through the space like a ghost, her thin frame swallowed by one of Vincent's oversized sweatshirts she had borrowed after spilling formula on her only sweater. Poverty's marks remained etched deep, wrists fragile as twigs, collarbones sharp beneath pale skin. Eyes shadowed from nights when sleep meant reliving the wind's howl through broken windows and the hollow ache of an empty stomach. Yet the babies thrived in tiny increments, gaining ounces, breathing deeper, their monitors painting steady green lines where red alarms had once dominated. Clara sat cross-legged on the plush rug, whispering to the incubators in the quiet hours after midnight. "Your Uncle Tommy would have loved you," she murmured to little Tommy, junior voice soft and cracked with memory. "He was kind, always smiling. He used to bring me hot chocolate when the diner shift ended late." The name slipped out unbidden, a fragment from a buried past. Tommy Moretti, Vincent's younger brother. The boy who had seen her when no one else did, who had shielded her from a drive-by years ago on a rain-slicked South Side street. The memory brought tears, Tommy bleeding out on wet pavement while she screamed for help that came too late. Vincent arriving only to hold his dying brother and promise vengeance that never brought peace. Vincent stood unseen in the shadowed hallway, returned from yet another tense street encounter. This one near State Street, an unexpected blockade by 3 Rossi vehicles at a red light, engines growling, drivers leaning out with hard stares over disputed protection money. His convoy had held formation, advancing slowly until the rivals peeled away with frustrated revs. No shots fired, but the message clear: they sensed distraction in the Moretti camp. Vincent's knuckles still whitened on the steering wheel memory. Power protected territory, but it could not protect the fragile hope blooming upstairs. He heard Clara's whisper Uncle Tommy, and something inside him shattered. The surge of love, already burning fierce and passionate, collided with gnawing remorse so violently his chest ached. He stepped into the nursery, light voice low and rough. "You knew my brother." Clara startled, rising too quickly, dizziness sweeping her in a numbing wave. The room tilted. She gripped an incubator to steady herself, pain lancing through her sleep-deprived skull. Shock and deep disorientation tore through her confusion, violently rending her guarded heart. This man whose wealth commanded private chefs and armored fleets now stood vulnerable before a name from her poorest days. Yes, she whispered, voice soft, timid, polite. Tommy he was good to me, back when I was just a kid, working nights at the diner. He used to walk me home sometimes. Said the streets weren't safe. Tears spilled, then hot and humiliating. That night, the drive-by, he pushed me down. Took the hits meant for me. I held him until... She couldn't finish. Vincent's face crumpled. Inner torment clawed deeper remorse, consuming him for arriving too late that night, for the choices that had painted a target on Tommy's back, for the empire built on shadows that stole light from everyone he loved. Violent conflict raged. He wanted to fall to his knees, confess every failure, Yet fear of burdening her fragile strength held him upright. "He never told me about you," Vincent said hoarsely. "Not by name. But he talked about a girl with sad eyes who smiled like sunrise. Said she made him want to be better." Clara's breath caught, heightened curiosity, warred with horror anxiety coiling tight as she realized the depth of connection. The unfairness crashed over her anew. Tommy gone because he protected her, a nobody from the South Side whose pregnancy later scattered any dreams of stability. She had carried the guilt alone through cold nights, through eviction threats, through hospital corridors where nurses pitied her inability to pay. Vincent closed the distance slowly, as if approaching something sacred. "I blamed myself," he admitted, voice breaking, "for not keeping him close enough, for the life I chose. Seeing you here, with his name on your lips." Love surged, overwhelming, passionate intensity burning away restraint. "It's like he's giving me a second chance. Through you, through them." Clara swayed, numbness flooding her limbs, psychological shock extreme. A powerful man whose convoy stared down rivals daily, who mobilized millions with a call, stood shattered before her poverty's truth. Tears streamed down her thin cheeks. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle sobs. Vincent reached her, then steadying her elbows with infinite gentleness. For the first time, he entered the sacred circle fully. "May I?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Tommy Jr. "Incubator." Clara nodded, unable to speak. Vincent's large hands that signed deals in dimly lit restaurants, that gripped steering wheels during tense standoffs, hovered trembling over the dome. Then, with the nurse's guidance, he reached inside, cradling the tiny boy against his chest for the first skin-to-skin contact. Tommy Jr. nestled instinctively, a faint sigh escaping. The sight undid Clara completely. She sank into the armchair, dizziness and pain blending into deep disorientation. Vincent Moretti, feared in streets where cars boxed each other in silent threats, held her son with reverence. Wealth's intensity pressed everywhere. The heated blanket warming the baby, the monitors costing fortunes, the security team outside repelling shadows. Yet his eyes, when they met hers, held only raw vulnerability. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice thick. "For Tommy, for every night you suffered alone, for not finding you sooner." Clara shook her head, tears falling faster. "You saved them. You saved us." The words emerged, desperate, impoverished gratitude from a woman who had nothing left to give. Vincent carefully returned Tommy Jr. to the incubator, then knelt before her chair, the most powerful man in Chicago on his knees before a destitute waitress. "I couldn't save him," he said brokenly, "but I'll spend every day trying to save you. All of you." The confession hung in quiet, condensed emotional stillness. Outside, city lights twinkled indifferently. Inside, monitors beeped their steady encouragement. Clara reached out hesitantly, her malnourished fingers brushing his cheek, stubble, rough skin, warm. Shock rippled through them both at the touch. Vincent caught her hand, gently pressing it to his face, as if afraid she would vanish. Love burned uncontrollably now, tearing his heart with violent intensity. Remorse and redemption collided. He who faced rivals without flinching trembled before this fragile woman. Clara's inner world tore apart, from suspicion born of hard survival to an overwhelming surge of trust, confusing and numbing. A man whose world invited danger now offered safety. The psychological shift was extreme poverty's humiliation stark against his protection's embrace. Later, as Vincent stood watch while Clara finally slept in the guest suite's king bed, silk sheets and down pillows, a mockery of her former cardboard-thin mattress, he received another alert: rivals massing near a shared warehouse, testing boundaries bolder than ever. Drama escalated, suspense tightening. Yet in the nursery's soft glow, Vincent touched the incubator domes one by one, whispering promises to 4 tiny fighters and their mother. The first crack in his armor had widened into a chasm, and through it poured a love fierce enough to reshape everything. For the first time in years, Vincent Moretti cried silently in the dark tears, for a brother lost, for a woman found, for the impossible family now, depending on a man who finally wanted to be worthy. The 1-month milestone arrived on a crisp October afternoon, the Chicago sky a brilliant blue beyond the penthouse windows. The nursery had been transformed into a gentle celebration, red, white, and blue, streamers draped in soft arcs, a custom, rainbow-layered sheet cake on a crystal stand, each layer a different color, topped with tiny fondant, baseballs, and 4 delicate candles. A hand-painted banner stretched across the far wall. Happy 1-month little fighters. Sophia, Isabella, Mia, and Tommy Jr. Plush blankets and heated cushions created a safe nest on the wide window seat overlooking Lake Michigan, where the babies, now strong enough to be briefly removed from incubators under careful supervision, could be held together for the fascination. First time, Clara Hayes stood in the center of it all, wearing a simple blue dress. Vincent's staff had delivered that morning, soft cotton, modest and new, the first clothing not worn thin by years of scraping by. Yet poverty's echoes lingered her frame, still malnourished wrists, fragile eyes carrying the weight of countless cold nights, when wind had been her only blanket and hunger, her constant companion. She smoothed the dress, nervously shame-flickering at accepting such generosity after a life of second-hand everything. The disparity pressed in the cake alone cost more than her monthly rent had been. The photographer waiting discreetly in the corner charged fees she could never have dreamed of. Vincent Moretti entered quietly, no longer in his usual tailored suits, but in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater dressed down for the first time in years. The change made him seem younger, more approachable, yet power still clung to him. The subtle tension in his shoulders from the morning's confrontation near Grant Park, where two Rossi vehicles had deliberately cut across his path at an intersection, forcing a hard brake and a prolonged stare down until his security escort nosed forward aggressively, claiming the lane without contact. Rivals grew bolder daily, sensing the shift in his focus. Drama coiled tighter outside these walls. He stopped at the sight of Clara, in the dress breath-catching. Love, passionate, intense, burning without relief, surged anew, tearing at his heart with violent force. Remorse clawed deeper for every moment he had kept distance, for the dangers now circling because of his attachment for the brother whose memory bound them. He wanted to shield her from every shadow, yet knew his world cast the darkest. "You look," he searched for words, voice rough. "Beautiful." Clara flushed dizziness, sweeping her at the compliment. Her voice emerged soft, timid, polite. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti, for all of this." She gestured weakly at the decorations, tears pricking. The unfairness of it, her baby's alive because of his wealth, while other mothers lost theirs in underfunded wards, tore at her inner world. The nurses carefully arranged the quadruplets in the prepared nest. Sophia in pale pink, Isabella in lavender, Mia in mint, Tommy Jr. in soft blue tiny outfits hand-sewn overnight. Each baby, though still fragile, breathed steadily on minimal support, eyes blinking at the new sensations. Clara knelt beside them, tears streaming silently as she gathered them close with practiced gentleness. Vincent joined her, his large hands steady as he helped support the bundle. 4 tiny lives nestled together against his chest for the first time. The photographer captured the moment quietly, Vincent and Clara, side by side on the window seat, the city skyline behind them, an American flag banner framing the scene. Sunlight poured in, gilding the cake and balloons. In that quiet, condensed emotional stillness, the monitor's beeps faded to background, replaced by the soft sounds of infant breaths. Clara looked up at Vincent, eyes shining. "They're here," she whispered, voice breaking. "Because of you." Vincent's throat tightened. He shifted carefully, one arm cradling the babies, while the other reached to brush a tear from her cheek. The touch lingered, thumb tracing the hollow beneath her eye, feeling the fragility born of hardship. "No," he said hoarsely. "Because of you. You never stopped fighting for them." The space between them shrank. Clara's breath caught. Confusion and heightened curiosity warred with fear. A man whose world involved daily standoffs, whose convoy had stared down rivals without flinching, now looked at her as if she were the only thing real. Shock rippled through her numbness in her fingers, deep disorientation making her heart pound. Vincent leaned closer, drawn by the burning passion that had consumed him since her arrival. Gratitude, long-buried tenderness, and fierce protectiveness collided. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, then deepening as she responded with a soft, involuntary sigh. The kiss ignited passionate and explosive years of restraint unraveling in seconds. Clara's thin hand rose to his chest, feeling the rapid beat beneath shock and overwhelming surge, tearing her inner world apart. From desperate poverty to this loved, protected by the most powerful man she had ever known. They pulled apart slowly, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling. The babies cooed softly between them, oblivious. Vincent's eyes searched, hers tormented. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have." Clara shook her head, tears falling faster. "Don't be." Her voice trembled, polite yet laced with wonder. The psychological shock was extreme dizziness, threatened to unbalance her completely. A kiss like that, intense, consuming from a man whose wealth could buy cities, given to a woman who days ago had nothing. In the aftermath, they sat in quiet stillness, the photographer discreetly withdrawing. Vincent helped Clara hold each baby individually, guiding her hands with infinite care. When Tommy Jr. gripped his finger, Vincent's composure cracked fully. He pressed his face into the tiny blanket shoulders, shaking with silent emotion. Clara watched, heart tearing violently. The man who commanded fear now wept over her son. Wealth's intensity surrounded them, the cake waiting to be cut, the private chef preparing a gentle celebration meal, the terrace heaters ready if they wished fresh air. Yet his tears were for lost years, for a brother gone, for the miracle of this moment. Later, as nurses returned the babies to incubators for rest, Vincent and Clara stood at the window overlooking the lake. The city sparkled below, oblivious to the drama escalating in its shadows. Another alert on his phone, rivals probing a neutral zone, vehicles circling slowly. Suspense tightened. Clara turned to him, voice soft. What happens now? Vincent took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Love burned in his gaze, passionate and unyielding. Now he said quietly, we fight for tomorrow. Together. Outside wind stirred the flags on distant buildings. Inside, in the glow of balloons and hope, two broken worlds began to heal. One kiss, one milestone, one fragile family at a time. The celebration continued gently. Cake shared with the staff, quiet toasts, with sparkling cider photos printed and framed before nightfall. Clara laughed through tears when Vincent clumsily helped cut the rainbow layers frosting on his strong hands. For the first time in years, she felt something beyond survival. And Vincent, watching her smile, knew the crack in his armor had become a gateway. Love had entered, fierce and irreversible, tearing his heart open to whatever came next. A historic Chicago blizzard struck without mercy in late October, turning the city into a frozen wilderness overnight. Snow fell thick and fast, wind howling against the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows like a living thing. Power flickered once, twice, then died completely just after midnight. The emergency generator kicked in with a low hum, but the house felt suddenly isolated, cut off from the world below, where streetlights vanished under white curtains and roads became impassable. Clara Hayes sat in the nursery's rocking chair, wrapped in a cashmere blanket Vincent had draped over her shoulders hours earlier. The babies slept in their incubator's monitors, glowing softly on backup power. She had not left the room all evening, her thin body tense beneath the luxury. Poverty's ghosts whispered, still memories of nights when heat failed in her old apartment, when she had huddled under every scrap of fabric while wind rattled loose panes, her pregnant belly aching with cold and hunger. The contrast humiliated her anew. This blanket alone, worth more than her entire wardrobe, had been the generator's steady thrum, a privilege she had never known. Vincent paced the hallway beyond phone to his ear, coordinating with security teams stranded below. Another confrontation had occurred just before the storm hit his convoy. Boxed in near the river by 4 Rossi vehicles during a routine supply run, engines revving in threat windows, cracked just enough for shouted challenges over territory. Lines. His men had held formation, advancing slowly through the intersection, until the rivals backed down, tires spinning on early ice. No shots, but the boldness lingered like smoke. Now with the city paralyzed, rivals could move unseen. He ended the call and entered the nursery, snowflakes melting on his dark coat. Storm's worsening, he said quietly. We'll be fine here. Clara nodded, voice soft and timid. The babies are warm. That's all that matters. Vincent's gaze lingered on her thin frame, swallowed by the blanket hair, limp from exhaustion, yet eyes fierce with maternal love. The burning passion in his chest flared, hotter clashing with gnawing remorse. He had pulled her from destitution, yet his world now endangered this fragile peace. Violent inner conflict tore at him, love demanding he keep her close, fear, screaming that closeness invited ruin. Around 1 a.m, Tommy Jr. stirred with a faint cry. Clara rose immediately, checking his temperature burning hot. Fever spiking fast. She called softly for Vincent, urgency steady despite trembling hands. He's too warm. We need to cool him. They worked together in the dim emergency lighting, cool cloths, gentle sponging, monitoring vitals. But the fever climbed relentlessly. Tommy Jr.'s breathing grew shallow, labored. Clara's heart pounded with horror, anxiety coiling like ice in her veins. The unfairness struck deep, her son fighting infection while trapped in luxury, when poorer mothers lost children to far less. Vincent grabbed the landline. No dial tone. Cell signals dead under the storm. I'll drive to the hospital, he said, voice tight. You won't make it 10 feet, Clara replied, calm masking terror. Snow piled against the terrace doors, wind screaming. Tommy Jr.'s lips tinged blue. His tiny chest stuttered. The monitor flatlined, a piercing wail cutting the stillness. Clara's world shattered. She pushed Vincent aside gently but firmly, tilting the baby's head, beginning infant compressions with practiced desperation. Come on, sweetheart, she whispered, counting softly, tears streaming. Stay with me. Vincent collapsed to his knees beside her, cradling Sophia, Isabella, and Mia, as they woke crying. His strong hands trembled, hands that stared down rivals now useless against this enemy. Please, he choked, forehead pressed to Tommy Jr.'s blanket. Take me instead. Minutes stretched eternal. Clara's arms burned, voice cracking. Breathe, baby. Your sisters need you. Your mama needs you. Pain tore through her, physical from effort, emotional from memory of every unfair loss. Then a gasp. Small, weak, but real. Tommy Jr.'s eyes fluttered. Color returned slowly. The monitor steadied. Vincent pulled the boy gently into his arms, sobbing openly into the tiny blanket. You're here, he whispered fiercely. You're still here. Clara sank back into the chair, body-shaking numbness flooding her limbs. Deep disorientation spun the room, dizziness, threatening balance, shock, extreme. Her baby had returned from the edge in this palace of wealth, while others perished unseen. As dawn struggled through snow-heavy clouds, power restored with a hum. A courier braved the storm hours later, delivering sealed lab results. Vincent had secretly ordered weeks earlier paternity tests, run discreetly after Tommy's resemblance stirred questions. Vincent opened the envelope alone, first hands shaking. The words blurred then, sharpened probability of paternity 99.99%. Tommy Jr. was his biological son, conceived during one hidden summer night 17 years ago, when Clara, barely 18, and Vincent, home briefly from rising in the family business, had shared a desperate, passionate moment under Southside stars. A night neither spoke of again, lives diverging into light and shadow. The revelation shattered him. He entered the nursery, slowly, envelope clutched. Clara looked up, exhausted but radiant with relief. "He's stable," she said softly, sleeping deeply. Vincent knelt before her again, tears fresh. "Clara." His voice broke. "That summer, before everything changed. You and I, one night." Clara's breath caught. Memory flooded. Youthful passion stolen hours. The ache of parting when his world called him deeper. Confusion and shock rippled through her, numbness returning. "You knew," I suspected, he admitted, tormented. "When he was born, the timing, his features. I ordered the test quietly." He handed her the paper. "He's mine. Ours." Clara stared at the results, dizziness crashing anew. Deep disorientation tore her inner world violently apart, pain behind eyes, heart pounding. From destitute single mother hiding pregnancy shame while scraping survival to this, her son fathered by Chicago's most powerful man. The psychological shock was overwhelming, tears spilling hot. Vincent gathered her hands. "All those years, you carried him alone, raised him through everything. The cold nights, the hunger. Remorse consumed him, violent conflict raging. Love burned fiercer, passionate, possessive, redemptive. I didn't know." If I had Clara pulled one hand free, pressing it to his cheek. "You saved him anyway," she whispered, voice trembling yet polite. "You saved all of them." Vincent leaned into her, touch eyes closing. "He's my son," he said brokenly. "And you've always been the light I couldn't reach." In the quiet that followed, snow softened against windows. The baby slept peacefully, monitors steady. Clara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. The kiss came naturally then, deeper than before, intense and healing, sealing the revelation. Outside the city remained buried rivals, stalled by nature's force. Inside, a family, fragile, improbable, began to form from ashes of past and present. Vincent held her close, heart tearing with joy and sorrow. He had a son he never knew, a woman he had always loved from afar. Wealth could buy safety, but this miracle cost everything: his walls, his isolation, his old life. Clara, in his arms, felt the last chains of poverty's humiliation loosen. Shock lingered, but beneath it bloomed guarded wonder, a future no longer alone. The blizzard raged on, but inside the penthouse, warmth human, fierce, enduring, finally won. The blizzard had passed, leaving Chicago buried under a heavy white silence. Power returned fully by dawn, generators humming down as city plows began their slow battle against drifts. In the penthouse nursery, the quadruplets slept peacefully. Monitors steady the revelation of Tommy Jr.'s paternity, still fresh and raw between Clara and Vincent. They had sat together through the remaining night hours, hands intertwined, speaking in whispers of the hidden summer that had created a son neither knew they shared. Clara's thin fingers traced Vincent's palm shock, and deep disorientation lingering in her eyes, numbness from the near-lost, dizziness from the impossible truth. From desperate poverty nights when cold wind was her lullaby and eviction, her constant fear to this loved fiercely by the father of her child, protected in a world of unimaginable wealth. Vincent watched her with burning intensity, love, passionate and consuming, tearing his heart with violent remorse. He had a son. Years lost to shadows. Yet joy clashed with gnawing fear. Rivals would exploit any vulnerability now. Mid-morning brought the first warning. Vincent's phone buzzed with encrypted messages from street lookouts, unusual movement near the building's underground garage. Rossi Crew signatures, vehicles circling slowly despite cleared roads. He dismissed it at first as post-storm opportunism, but tension coiled tighter. Clara noticed the shift in him, the way his jaw set, eyes darkening. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, voice timid and polite. "Nothing you need to worry about," he replied, forcing calm. But inside, torment raged. He would not let his world touch her. By afternoon, the threat materialized. Security feeds showed armed figures breaching lower levels, men in dark coats, slipping past outer checkpoints. A traitor inside Vincent's organization had leaked the penthouse's private access codes. Whispers had spread. Moretti had a secret son, a vulnerable family tucked away in his tower. Rivals saw weakness. Alarms triggered silently. Vincent's most trusted men rushed upstairs, barricading elevators. He guided Clara and the nurses into the nursery's reinforced inner room, incubators wheeled in hastily. "Stay here," he ordered, voice steel over panic. "Lock it behind me." Clara's heart pounded with horror, anxiety freezing her blood. "Vincent, no," he cupped her face, kiss fierce and desperate. "I will protect you. All of you." Love burned in his eyes, overwhelming surge, clashing with violent inner conflict. Remorse tore at him for drawing her into this, for the life that made enemies of men who now climbed his stairs. Gunfire echoed distantly. Muffled pops in hallways, shouts in Italian. Vincent and his loyal capo held the outer corridor, weapons drawn but restrained, pushing intruders back with calculated force. Bullets sparked against walls. One grazed Vincent's arm, warm blood soaking his sleeve. Pain barely registered, only the thought of Clara and the babies behind the door. Clara huddled with the nurses, cradling the quadruplets close. Shock rippled through her dizziness, threatening balance, numbness in limbs. The psychological shock was extreme, from malnourished nights, rationing crumbs, to this gunfire in a palace because she had dared accept rescue. Tears streamed silently. She pressed kisses to each tiny forehead, whispering apologies for the unfairness that followed her even here. Vincent fought with controlled fury, disarming one intruder, forcing retreat. But the attackers pressed bold and coordinated. In the chaos, Clara heard Vincent's voice rise, sharp command, then a grunt of pain. Fear tore her inner world violently apart. She cracked the door, peering out. Vincent stood bloodied but upright, shielding the nursery entrance. An intruder lunged. Vincent grappled, pinning the man. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The captive spat defiance until Vincent's capo recognized him, a low-level soldier once loyal. Betrayal confirmed. Clara stepped out, despite warnings, voice trembling yet fierce. "Stop, please." Her thin frame shook, but maternal desperation overrode fear. Vincent whirled, horror flashing. Clara back inside. In that moment of distraction, another attacker fired a warning shot, splintering wood near Vincent's head. Clara cried out, rushing forward instinctively. Vincent shoved her behind him, taking position. "Enough," he roared down the hall. Reinforcements, his most trusted, arrived, then turning the corridor into a standoff. Outnumbered, the intruders retreated, dragging wounded, vanishing into stairwells. Silence fell, broken only by distant sirens. Vincent slammed the door shut, leaning against it, blood dripping from his arm. Clara reached him, hands fluttering over the wound. "You're hurt. It's nothing," he rasped, pulling her close. But his body shook remorse, consuming love, burning hotter for her courage. "You shouldn't have come out. I couldn't lose you," she whispered, tears falling on his shirt. Shock and confusion numbed her. Deep disorientation spun the room. Poverty's humiliation lingered even now, her life endangering his because she had nothing else. Vincent bandaged quickly with his capo's help, issuing orders full lockdown traitor hunt. Wealth mobilized, private medical team en route, security doubled. Yet the ambush exposed vulnerability. Later in the nursery's quiet aftermath, Vincent sat with Clara amid the babies. Snow melted outside, city resuming slow life. He held her hand, thumb tracing her fragile knuckles. "They know about Tommy," he said quietly. "About us." Clara's breath hitched, anxiety coiling. "What does that mean?" "It means war if I let it." His voice hardened, tormented. "But I won't. I'll end this clean." Clara searched his face, guarded curiosity beneath fear. How Vincent met her gaze, love, passionate and protective. By reminding them what happens when they touch what's mine. In condensed emotional stillness, they sat together. Vincent cradling Tommy Jr., Clara leaning against his uninjured shoulder. The babies cooed, softly oblivious. Wealth's intensity surrounded reinforced doors, medical supplies arriving by private elevator. Yet danger's shadow lengthened. Clara whispered, voice soft. "I never wanted this for you. For them." Vincent kissed her forehead. "You are my redemption," he murmured. "Worth any fight." Outside, plows cleared streets, but rivals regrouped in hidden corners. Drama escalating, suspense, a living wire. Inside, a family forged in crisis, held tighter, love burning brighter against gathering dark. The ambush had failed, but betrayal's wound cut deepest. Vincent's heart tore violently, joy of fatherhood clashing with fear of loss. He would protect them, whatever the cost. Clara in his arms felt poverty's chains finally break. Shock lingered, but love fierce returned, anchored her. They were no longer alone. The afternoon following the ambush stretched long and heavy in the penthouse. Snow had begun to melt in weak October, sun dripping from the terrace railings like slow tears. The nursery remained a fortress. Doors reinforced windows, checked nurses on high alert. Clara Hayes sat on the wide window seat, the quadruplets nestled safely in their portable bassinets beside her. She wore the same soft blue dress from the milestone celebration, now wrinkled and stained with faint traces of Vincent's blood from when she had pressed a cloth to his wounded arm. Her hands still trembled faintly. The memory of gunfire echoing in marble hallways clawed at her mind. Poverty's cruel echoes mocked her even here. She, who had once walked miles in threadbare shoes to save bus fare, now sat in a room worth millions, while men fought over her presence. Vincent stood across the nursery, speaking in low Italian, to his most trusted capo Marco, a man who had been at his side since youth. The traitor from the ambush had been identified. Vincent's own godfather, Salvatore Ricci, a silver-haired elder jealous of Vincent's rising power and desperate for the profits a renewed street war would bring. Betrayal cut deepest from family. Vincent's face was stone, but inside, torment raged, gnawing remorse for trusting too long, violent inner conflict, tearing at the code he had lived by. Wealth mobilized swiftly. Private physicians had stitched his graze. Security firms doubled patrols, encrypted calls, rerouted assets. Yet none of it quieted the storm in his heart. Clara watched him, anxiety coiling tight. "Is it over?" she asked softly, voice timid and polite, laced with the fear of a woman who had learned powerlessness young. Vincent ended the call, crossing to her. He knelt, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. Love burned in his eyes, passionate, intense, an overwhelming surge that had only grown fiercer through crisis. "Not yet," he admitted quietly. "But it will be." Before she could respond, Marco's phone buzzed an urgent summons. Salvatore had requested a sit-down in a neutral warehouse near the river, claiming desire to clear the air. Vincent's jaw clenched. He knew it for what it was, a final play. "I'm going," he told Marco. Then turning to Clara, "Stay here. Locked down. I'll be back soon." Clara's breath hitched, horror flashing. "Vincent, no." After yesterday, he cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her lip. "I have to end this. For us. For them." He nodded toward the sleeping babies. The kiss he gave her then was desperate, consuming, sealing a vow. Clara clung to him a moment longer, dizziness sweeping her at the thought of loss. Shock and deep disorientation numbed her. The room seemed to sway. From nights of cold wind and empty cupboards to this, her son's father walking into danger because of her. Vincent left with Marco and a small escort, armored SUVs cutting through slushy streets. The warehouse district lay quiet under gray sky. They arrived to find Salvatore waiting alone in the vast, empty space, silver hair, gleaming hands open in false peace. Vincent, the old man, greeted, voice smooth. "Family shouldn't fight." Vincent's men fanned out. "You sent men to my home," Vincent said coldly. "To my son, my woman." Salvatore's mask slipped jealousy, twisting his features. "You grew soft. A waitress and bastard brats weakening our name. War would have made us strong again, money flowing." The confession hung heavy. Vincent's heart tore violently, remorse for the mentor who had once guided him, rage at the betrayal that endangered Clara and the babies. "You taught me loyalty," Vincent said quietly, "but you forgot it." Salvatore reached slowly inside his coat for a weapon or gesture of surrender. It didn't matter. Vincent moved faster, disarming him with brutal efficiency. The struggle was brief, controlled Marco and others holding back as Vincent pinned the godfather against cold concrete. "You die for this, Vincent," whispered voice, breaking with torment. He delivered justice swiftly, personally, a single act that ended the threat but scarred his soul deeper. Blood stained the warehouse floor, echoing the past he could never fully escape. Marco handled cleanup silently. Vincent stood over the body, a long moment, chest heaving. Wealth could buy silence, loyalty, new beginnings, but not absolution. Love for Clara burned hotter through the pain, passionate vow forming he would leave this darkness for her, for their children. He returned to the penthouse hours later, coat discarded, shirt sleeves, rolled hands, scrubbed clean, but eyes haunted. Clara waited in the nursery doorway, face pale. She saw the blood flecks he had missed, the weight in his stance. "What happened?" she whispered, voice trembling. Vincent closed the distance, pulling her into his arms. Covered in the residue of justice, he dropped to his knees before her, Chicago's most powerful man, humbled. "It's over," he rasped. "The threat is gone. But I—" Tears came then, hot and silent. "I ended it myself. For you. For our son. Our daughters." Clara's breath caught shock, rippling numbness, flooding limbs. Horror at the act warred with understanding. He had protected them in the only language his world knew. Tears spilled as she sank to her knees too, pulling him close despite the gunpowder scent. "You came back," she whispered fiercely. "That's what matters." Vincent buried his face in her neck, body shaking. Love surged, explosive, passionate, desperate. He kissed her then with raw intensity, tears mixing, hands tangling in her hair. The kiss deepened, sealing fates, forgiveness, commitment, future. Clara responded with equal fire, confusion, and fear melting into overwhelming return. From destitute isolation to this loved, chosen, protected at ultimate cost. Psychological shock tore her inner world, but joy broke through dizziness of wonder, not pain. They knelt together in quiet, condensed emotional stillness, babies sleeping nearby. Wealth's intensity pressed, reinforced home, now truly safe resources, shifting toward legitimate paths Vincent had already begun planning. Outside city lights emerged as dusk fell, rivals, leaderless threats scattered. Vincent pulled back slightly, forehead against hers. "I will burn this entire life down before I let anyone touch you again," he vowed, voice thick. Clara cupped his face, tears shining. "Then build a new one," she whispered. "With us." In that moment, vows formed stronger than any ring, blood and love intertwined, redemption beginning. Drama had crested suspense, easing into resolve. Vincent rose, lifting Clara with him, carrying her to the window overlooking the thawing city. Together they watched lights flicker on a new chapter dawning. The Godfather's betrayal ended in blood, but from it rose unbreakable commitment. Vincent's heart, torn widest, began to heal in her arms. Clara, once powerless against cold and hunger, now stood at the center of fierce protection. Love passionate returned, consumed them, both promising everything ahead. 10 years had passed since the blizzard night that changed everything. Spring came early to the sprawling suburban estate outside Chicago, roses and tulips bursting in wild color along winding paths. The house, far from the fortified Gold Coast penthouse, sat on acres of green lawn, ringed by discreet security that had grown quieter with time. Vincent Moretti had kept his vow. He dismantled most of the old empire, laundering resources into legitimate security firms and neonatal charities that now saved thousands of fragile lives across the city. Wealth remained, but it served light instead of shadow. Clara Moretti, married quietly in a small garden ceremony 5 years earlier, stood in the bright kitchen mixing batter for a rainbow cake. She had filled out over the years, cheeks soft with health, hair shining from proper care and rest. Yet she still moved with the careful grace of someone who remembered cold wind and empty cupboards, who knew the humiliation of choosing between heat and food. Poverty's memory never fully faded. It made her gratitude deeper, her love fiercer. The quadruplets, now 10 years old, tore through the garden with boundless energy. Sophia led the charge, dark curls flying as she chased Isabella around the old oak tree. Mia organized a makeshift baseball game with neighborhood friends, her gentle laugh carrying on the breeze. Tommy Jr., tall like his father and fierce in protection, guarded the bases with serious concentration. Their voices rose in joyful chaos. No monitors, no tubes, just life loud and free. Vincent watched from the porch, leaning against the railing, coffee mug forgotten in his hand. At 52, lines of experience etched his fair skin, but peace softened his eyes. The burning love that had ignited the moment Clara walked into his penthouse had only grown passionate, intense, explosive in private moments, when bedroom doors closed and music covered the sounds of their still fierce desire. Inner torment had quieted, but remorse lingered gently for years, lost for the Godfather's blood on his hands, for every cold night Clara endured before he found her again. Violent conflict no longer raged. Redemption had won. He crossed the lawn now, joining the game. Tommy Jr. grinned up at him. "Dad, you're up." Vincent ruffled his son's hair. The boy who had taught him fatherhood, who carried his blood, and Clara's unbreakable spirit. He pitched gently, letting the children hit easy wins, laughter rising like birdsong. Clara stepped onto the porch, wiping flour from her hands, watching the scene with tears she no longer hid. From destitute single mother, thin, malnourished, sleep-deprived, enduring nights, when wind cut like knives through cracked walls, to this surrounded by family built not by blood alone but by love that refused to quit. Wealth and poverty could not separate true compassion. Skin color, background, none of it mattered when hearts recognized home. That evening, they gathered around the long oak table, rainbow cake in the center, candles flickering for Clara's birthday this time. The children shouted, "Happy birthday, Mom," in joyful chorus. Vincent raised his glass of sparkling cider. 10 years ago, he said quietly, voice thick, "You walked into my life when everything was dark. You didn't bring money or power. You brought hope. You taught us love is stronger than fear." Clara's eyes filled. She looked around the table at Sophia's bright curiosity, Isabella's gentle smile, Mia's thoughtful gaze, Tommy Jr.'s protective grin, Vincent's grateful face. This was her promise, kept her healing too. Later, under starlit sky on the porch, Vincent took her hand. "Do you ever think about those old days?" he asked softly. Clara leaned into him. "Every day," she whispered. "It reminds me how precious this is, how knowledge of pain makes joy deeper, how the lesson of endurance teaches compassion, how education in loss builds unbreakable love." Vincent kissed her temple. "Knowledge changes everything," he murmured. The lesson we learned that love crosses every divide. The education hardship gave us gratitude, strength, forgiveness. Clara nodded, tears shining. Knowledge of suffering makes us kind. The lesson of second chances makes us brave. The education of the heart makes us whole. They stood in comfortable silence, wind gentle now, carrying garden scents. Love whispered back, fierce and enduring. This story carries deep life lessons. Knowledge reminds us that wealth and poverty cannot dim true compassion. The lesson shows that love knows no skin color, no boundary. Education teaches that redemption is always possible when we choose light. Knowledge of past pain makes present joy sacred. The lesson of family not born but chosen binds forever. Education in forgiveness heals the deepest wounds. Knowledge that every cold night ends in dawn. The lesson that hope once kindled burns eternal. Education that love fierce and passionate conquers all. To everyone watching this video, may you have good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel Alex Truths, like this video, and share it with those who need hope today. We post engaging stories every day to remind us of the beauty in human hearts. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it connect to something in your real life? Share your emotions. I'd love to read the feelings deep within your hearts. See you in the next video. Goodbye for now. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.